The call came 3 weeks after I walked out, frantic and raw, slicing through the new quiet of my life. My mother's voice, usually laced with careful Southern politeness, was shaking, broken by the threat of everything she and my father had built, their home being ripped away. She didn't call to apologize for the scream that had exiled me. She called because the mortgage, the payment I had silently covered for years, had stopped, and now the bank was calling the shots. They had chosen my brother Jackson over me, handing me an ultimatum that day to pay his $10,000 debt or lose my home. I chose to lose the home, and now they were losing theirs. The consequence of their blind loyalty had arrived, swift and cold. I paused, letting the silence on the line stretch, measuring the weight of their desperation against the years of my sacrifice, and then I delivered the words I knew would shut them down completely. How had we reached this precipice? It started with a promise, a savings plan, and the unexpected arrival of chaos cloaked in cheap cologne. My name is Ilara Vance. I was 29 years old, a marketing specialist working tirelessly at Zenith Communications in Cascade City, Montana. For the past 3 years, my life had been a carefully constructed exercise in delayed gratification. Work, save, repeat. I lived in the separate guest house on my parents' property, a small but functional space that allowed me privacy while fueling my future. This arrangement was built on a firm financial deal. I paid 1,500 credits a month toward their primary mortgage. It wasn't formal rent, but a substantial contribution that kept their finances stable and, in exchange, kept me on track to own my own place. I chased client approvals, meticulously crafted pitches, and managed high-stakes regional campaigns, always with my savings goal hovering in my mind. I even consciously cut out small luxuries, like my daily coffee run, calculating how every fraction of a credit saved pushed me closer to the day I could secure a down payment in the competitive Cascade City market. Life was a tight routine, predictable and productive, until my younger brother Jackson crashed back into our reality. He arrived without warning, towing a battered duffel bag and a string of well-worn excuses. Jackson had lost his bartending job in the city of High Peaks, squandering thousands on impulsive buys, designer clothing, rounds of expensive drinks for strangers, and late-night gambling apps. He reeked of cheap cologne and failure. I found him one afternoon bragging about purchasing a ridiculously expensive leather jacket for 800 credits. This infuriated me. I was meticulously scraping together every spare credit to keep the family mortgage stable and secure my future, while he was indulging in sheer extravagance. He offered no apologies, only a flippant grin, promising vaguely that he would sort it out soon. But Jackson's track record screamed volumes against his easy promises. I recalled years earlier when he was 19, borrowing cash from my parents, Arthur and Clara Vance, for emergencies that inevitably materialized into concert tickets or bar tabs. The tension soon became suffocating. I attempted to inject reason into the situation during a quiet dinner one evening. I kept my voice measured, cutting into my chicken as I laid out the obvious truth. Jackson needs to get a job, I stated, trying to sound helpful rather than accusatory. We can't keep bankrolling his mistakes. Mom Clara immediately bristled. Her face tightened, and she placed her fork down sharply. He's going through a rough patch, she insisted, her voice soft but defensive. We're all in this together. Dad, Arthur, nodded his agreement, his jaw set. In their eyes, I was the one creating friction, the one being unreasonable. They had always harbored a profound, often blinding soft spot for Jackson, their baby boy who could seemingly do no wrong. I, the responsible one, the one who paid bills and upheld agreements, was automatically expected to pick up the resultant slack. The unspoken message was crystal clear. I should simply dip into my painstakingly accumulated savings to absorb his rising debts. The mere thought of sacrificing my dreams for his self-inflicted chaos made my stomach churn. I had worked too hard to let his choices derail me. The pressure began to mount daily. Mom initiated subtle but constant guilt trips, dropping calculated hints about the sanctity of family and the importance of supporting Jackson to help him get back on his feet. Dad was less subtle, treating my financial success as a communal resource. "You're doing well at your job," he would remark, confirming my suspicion that they viewed my paycheck merely as a family ATM. I fought back with logic, explaining repeatedly that my savings were earmarked strictly for my future, not as a cushion for Jackson's recklessness. But every single conversation ended the same way, them united in Jackson's defense, and me forced to bite my tongue to maintain the precarious illusion of peace. The strain started to erode my professional competence. The massive campaign I was leading at Zenith Communications required total focus, and I was already stretched thin. One afternoon, distracted by replaying Mom's latest manipulative comment, I completely flubbed a client call, confusing key budget figures. My boss, noticing my distraction, pulled me aside. I plastered on a forced smile and claimed everything was fine, but internally I was spiraling. I found myself staring at spreadsheets, no longer calculating ad projections, but trying to estimate how long I could continue covering the mortgage while Jackson actively drained us dry. My savings account, which had previously demonstrated steady growth, was now stagnant. With every balance check, a pang of deep resentment flared. Desperate, I tried to appeal directly to Jackson, hoping a moment of clear reason might penetrate his indifference. I found him sprawled on the main house couch one evening, scrolling endlessly on his phone. "You need to stop spending," I told him, striving to keep my voice neutral. "I am not going to cover for you." He barely glanced up, murmuring something vague about a new job he might acquire. I pressed him further, demanding details about his debt. How much, who he owed it to, and when he planned to pay it back. He offered only a dismissive shrug, claiming it was under control, then abruptly changed the subject to a party he'd recently attended. I walked away, my hands shaking with the certainty that he possessed no plan whatsoever. The guest house, which had once felt like my quiet, purposeful retreat, began to feel like a cage. I lay awake at night, listening to the monotonous hum of the heater, consumed by the question of how I had become the unwilling safety net for my entire family. The parental mantra, "We're all in this together," felt like a cruel joke. It wasn't we. It was me against Jackson's growing chaos, with Mom and Dad constantly cheering him on. The crushing weight of their expectations intensified. Then, a week after that failed confrontation with Jackson, I discovered a credit card statement tucked among my usual bills in the mail. It was addressed to me at the guest house, but it was from a bank I had never used. My hands were trembling violently as I tore it open. $5,000 in charges, purchases for online gaming sites, various bars, and a rental car I'd never driven. My stomach dropped into a hollow pit. The account had been opened in my name, utilizing my social security number, yet I had never applied for it. I knew instantly who the culprit was. Jackson's reckless spending had officially detonated in my life, and now my credit, my financial reputation, and my future were on the line. The statement crumpled in my fist as I stormed toward the main house. I found him in the kitchen, casually microwaving leftovers, acting as if the world revolved around his slightest whim. "You used my name." I forced the words out, low and sharp, holding up the damning paper. "You opened a credit card and ran up 5,000 credits. Are you insane?" He froze momentarily, then recovered, leaning against the counter with a brazen shrug. "It's not a big deal," he said, smirking. "I needed some cash flow. I'll handle it." His utterly casual tone ignited a fire inside me. "Handle it? You're ruining my credit. This is fraud." Snap. He rolled his eyes, treating my fury like an overreaction, and mumbled, "You've got money. Just pay it off for now." I was incredulous. He wasn't just shirking responsibility. He was blaming me for his crime. I stepped closer, refusing to back down. "You are fixing this," I declared. "Call the bank. Admit what you did, or I will report you." The smirk vanished, replaced by a defensive scowl. "You're so selfish," he shot back, his voice thick with accusation. "Always acting like you're better than me." The accusation stung deeply, but I held my ground. "This isn't about me," I said. "You crossed a line. Fix it, or I'm reporting you for fraud." He grabbed his plate and stalked out, muttering under his breath. I stood alone, my heart pounding, the weight of his profound betrayal sinking in. My identity, my future, was now tangled up in his chaotic web. That night, my voice remained steady despite the internal panic. I called the bank. The representative confirmed that the account had been active for 3 weeks, directly tied to my personal information. I explained the situation, that it wasn't me, and they immediately flagged it for fraud. They advised me to freeze my credit, a tedious, necessary process that consumed hours as I locked down my accounts with every reporting agency. Every action was a stark, brutal reminder of how deeply Jackson's recklessness had penetrated my life. It was no longer just about money. My dream of buying a house, already distant due to the 1,500 credits I paid monthly toward my parents' mortgage, was now seriously at risk of vanishing entirely. I presented the facts to Mom and Dad the next day, hoping they would grasp the severity of the situation. We sat in the living room, the atmosphere thick with cold tension. I carefully laid out the statement, explaining the fraud and the $5,000 misuse. "He used my identity," I stated, my voice calm but unwavering. "This could ruin me. You need to make him stop." Mom, Clara, immediately crumpled, twisting her hands in her lap. "He didn't mean it," she insisted softly. "He's just in a tight spot." I stared at her, incredulous. Then Dad, Arthur, leaned forward, his jaw tight. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill," he declared, his dismissal instant and complete. "Pay it off, and we'll deal with him later." I felt a physical shock, as if I had been punched. They weren't just defending Jackson. They were actively dismissing the fact that he had committed a crime and put my entire financial life at grave risk. "You're not listening," I cried, my voice finally rising. "This isn't just about money. He committed a crime." Mom shook her head, tears welling up. "Don't say that about your brother," she whispered. Dad's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You've got a good job," he stated, employing the familiar line about the family ATM. "You can handle this. Stop stirring up trouble." The sheer unfairness of it burned hotter than any anger. I was the one maintaining their mortgage, keeping their family unit solvent, yet I was instantly cast as the villain simply for demanding accountability for fraud. They had chosen him again. I retreated from the house, my hands shaking, the crumpled statement still clutched tightly. Work offered a necessary but increasingly temporary escape. My boss had recently handed me a crucial opportunity, leading a vast new ad campaign for a prominent national client. This was my chance to prove myself and secure the coveted senior strategist role. The pitch deadline was fast approaching, and I was dangerously behind, my focus completely shredded by the chaos and betrayal at home. I stayed late at the office, staring blankly at mock-ups, but my mind endlessly replayed the credit card statement, Mom's excuses, and Dad's immediate dismissal. During a team meeting, my concentration failed entirely, and I fumbled a basic question regarding budget projections, my thoughts tangled in the detailed fraud report I had filed. My boss raised an eyebrow, and I forced a smile, promising to follow up. I knew I couldn't let this domestic mess destroy my professional shot. Back in the guest house, I paced the confining space. Jackson's identity theft was more than just a betrayal. It was a blaring alarm. I realized I could not possibly continue living under their roof, bound by their rules and their blind, damaging loyalty to him. The guest house, once a pragmatic stepping stone, had become a definite trap. I had protected my credit for now, but how many months until Jackson pulled an even more destructive stunt? Mom and Dad's complete refusal to hold him accountable was a devastating warning. They would forever expect me to fix his escalating messes and to sacrifice my core goals for his continuous mistakes. The thought of allowing this toxic cycle to continue, made my skin crawl. I needed an exit, even if it meant abandoning my savings plan and starting entirely from scratch. Days after the credit card fiasco, Dad called a family meeting that served as the final breaking point. I walked into the living room, my stomach tight, sensing the inevitable storm. Mom, Clara, sat fidgeting on the couch, while Jackson was sprawled in an armchair, scrolling on his phone, the picture of disinterest. Dad, Arthur, stood near the window, his face grim and hardened, the dusk of Cascade City casting long shadows around him. "We've got a serious problem," he announced, his voice low and razor-sharp. "Your brother's debts are out of control again. 10,000 credits from gambling apps and shopping sprees." I braced myself. "You are covering it, Elara," he continued, without a trace of remorse. "Or you're out of the guest house." The word struck me like a physical blow. 10,000 credits. On top of the fraud and the years of support. My head spun, but I forced my face to remain steady. "I am not paying for his mistakes," I stated firmly, though my hands were shaking at my sides. "I've already done far more than enough for this family." Jackson didn't even bother to look up, his thumb still idly swiping across his screen. Mom's voice pierced the silence, soft and pleading. "He's genuinely trying, Elara," she claimed. "He just needs a little bit of help to get back on track. Family sacrifices for family." Her words tasted like ash, reinforcing their poisonous favoritism. "Sacrifices?" I shot back, my tone unintentionally sharper than I had intended. "I've been sacrificing for years, keeping this house afloat. When does he step up?" Dad's eyes narrowed further, his jaw clenched. "You've got a good job," he repeated the mantra, dismissing my efforts entirely. "You can afford it. Stop making this harder than it needs to be." The injustice was searing. I turned to Jackson, desperate for any sign of shame or repentance. "You are drowning us," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. "You blew 10 grand on nonsense, and I'm expected to fix it? Explain yourself." He offered a languid shrug, leaning back in the chair, his voice dripping with indifference. "It's not my fault things got tight," he said. "You're always so high and mighty, acting like you're perfect." His childish deflection was a slap, but I refused to flinch. "This isn't about me," I snapped. "You crossed a line, and I am not cleaning up your mess again." He simply rolled his eyes and returned to his phone, utterly dismissing my presence. I turned back to Dad, searching for the smallest shred of reason. "He's not even trying," I pointed out. "Why am I the one who has to pay?" Dad took a step forward, his voice escalating rapidly. "Because you're part of this family," he shouted. "Either you help or you leave and don't come back." The room went utterly silent, his words hanging in the air, heavy with shock and utter betrayal. Mom gasped, reaching out to touch his arm, but he violently pulled away. Tears stung my eyes, not from sadness, but from the raw, blinding sting of their deliberate choice. They were selecting him, the fraud and the spendthrift, over me, their financially responsible daughter. Mom tried weakly to soften the blow, her voice shaky. "Elara, please," she begged. "We just need to stick together. He'll figure it out." I shook my head, my throat constricted. "You keep enabling him," I said, my voice breaking. "You're letting him ruin us, and I'm the one paying the price." I looked one last time at Jackson, still glued to his phone, completely unbothered by the chaos he had manufactured. "You don't even care," I whispered, the finality settling over me. He offered no response, not even a glance. I turned away and walked out, my footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. The guest house felt instantly colder when I returned. The walls felt like they were actively closing in. Their demand, 10,000 credits for Jackson's recklessness, was an unacceptable weight. I sat on my bed, my mind racing. My years of contributions, my relentless effort to keep their lives stable, meant nothing to them. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a perpetually renewable resource. Jackson's debts, his indifference, and their blind defense created a cycle I realized I could only break by physically leaving their property. If I stayed, I would lose far more than money. I would lose my entire self. I grabbed my phone and called Sienna, my best friend since college. Her voice, warm and steady, instantly cut through the internal fog. I spilled the whole miserable truth. Dad's harsh ultimatum, the impossible 10,000 credit demand, Jackson's apathy, and Mom's endless excuses. My voice cracked as I admitted the bitter truth. They're choosing him over me. Sienna's response was immediate and resolute. You don't deserve this, Ilara. You need to get out. For good. Her words struck me hard, echoing the necessary thoughts I had been trying to suppress. Staying meant unending demands, further betrayal, and watching my dreams actively slip away. I took a deep, shaking breath, staring at the guest house walls. Leaving would incur immediate costs, rent, moving expenses, a significant hit to my savings. I had been so close to my goal, perhaps only a year away from securing a down payment. Leaving now meant pushing that dream back maybe 2 years, perhaps more. But staying meant endless, soul-destroying fights and Jackson's recklessness continually draining my life force. Can we talk tomorrow? I asked Sienna, my voice now steadier. I need to figure out the logistics of leaving. Anytime, she replied instantly, her tone firm. I've got your back. For the first time that night, a genuine spark of hope ignited within me. The guest house was not home. It was a chain, and I was finally ready to break it. Dad's ultimatum had drawn the line, but I was the one who would ultimately decide where to stand. The next morning, Sienna and I met at a local coffee shop. The place buzzed with life, but my mind was laser-focused on escape. I relayed the whole painful saga to Sienna. The $10,000 demand, Dad's final screamed command to get out. Sienna leaned forward, her eyes unwavering. You absolutely cannot stay, she stated plainly. They are using you. Come live with me in my downtown apartment. It's small, but I have space. Her offer was a massive lifeline. I ran the necessary numbers. Splitting rent with Sienna would cost around 1,000 credits a month, less than 2/3 of the mortgage contribution I was currently making. However, I would still need to continue covering the 1,500 credits for Mom and Dad until the moment I could fully sever financial ties. I acknowledged that my house down payment savings would take a beating, pushing back my goals, but the alternative was annihilation. It's worth it, I said, my voice firming with resolve. I need to be out of there. Later that day, I met with Reese, a trusted colleague from Zenith Communications. I told him about the massive blowout, how Dad had literally thrown me out of my temporary home over Jackson's debt. Reese put down his sandwich, his brow furrowed in sympathy. You are killing it at work, Ilara, he reminded me. You have a clear shot at that senior strategist role. Don't let them drag you back down. His words resonated deeply. My career was the sole remaining aspect of my life that I could control, the one area where I was undeniably succeeding. You're absolutely right, I agreed. I need to focus on me for once. Reese nodded, his voice calm and sure. Leaving is the necessary call. You've got this. That conversation sealed my decision. I spent the next several days planning my move in absolute secrecy, taking utmost care not to alert Mom, Dad, or Jackson. I finalized my agreement with Sienna. Her apartment was a cozy, well-located one-bedroom in central Cascade City, close to work, with rent that was manageable if I strictly adhered to a tightened budget. I started the arduous task of packing my possessions in the guest house. Clothes went into heavy duffel bags, books into sturdy boxes. I carefully labeled them storage and tucked them away in the corner of my closet to deter Jackson, who had been lounging in the main house, perpetually oblivious to the gravity of the situation. Mom and Dad, having delivered their ultimatum, were now acting as though nothing significant had transpired. I called a local moving service, booking a small van for the end of the week. The cost, 400 credits, was painful for my savings, but a small price for the freedom it represented. I maintained my routine perfectly to throw them off the scent. Brief, forced breakfasts with Mom, quick small talk with Dad about work, even a forced smile for Jackson. Internally, I was a wreck, constantly second-guessing my enormous decision. What if I failed to cover the rent? What if the promotion doesn't materialize? But whenever I wavered, I heard Dad's final, sharp voice. Get out. I would not stay where I was so clearly unwanted. Sienna helped coordinate everything via late-night texts. She sent the lease agreement for my review and promised to aggressively clear out space in her limited closet for my belongings. Her consistent, firm optimism was my anchor. Crucially, I also met with my bank. I meticulously separated my personal finances from the family's joint account, ensuring Jackson could never again touch a single credit. It felt like the satisfying snap of a massive chain breaking. By Friday, every detail was locked down. A new address, a firm moving date, and a revised budget. I was moving in with Sienna, splitting the rent, and starting the slow, hard work of rebuilding. The guest house, my former safe haven, now felt like a dead weight I was thrilled to discard. I was scared, yes, but for the first time in months, I felt completely in control of my own trajectory. Saturday arrived, quiet and perfect. My family was away at a cousin's wedding. I stood in the guest house, my heart racing but steady, recognizing this window as my one chance. Sienna pulled up exactly on time in her reliable beat-up hatchback, and Reese arrived minutes later in a rented moving van, its engine rumbling reassuringly in the driveway. We had a narrow window. Mom, Dad, and Jackson wouldn't return until evening. I had planned this operation for speed and cleanliness. I took only the essentials. My clothes, necessary books, my work laptop, and one box of cherished keepsakes. The rest, old furniture, small knickknacks, I deliberately left behind. It felt like shedding an old, suffocating skin. Let's do this, Sienna said brightly, grabbing a duffel bag, her voice firm. Reese, ever the pragmatist, began efficiently loading the heavy boxes. His sleeves rolled up. You are doing the right thing, he assured me, carefully placing my laptop case on top of the stack. Their unwavering support kept me grounded. We worked with incredible speed, carrying boxes and bags through the mild morning drizzle. The van was fully loaded in under an hour. I constantly glanced toward the main house, half expecting Jackson to materialize and attempt a scene, but the building remained perfectly silent. By noon, we were heading toward Sienna's apartment in central Cascade City. The drive was incredibly short, barely 15 minutes, but it felt like crossing a national border. Her place was a small, cramped one-bedroom, furnished with mismatched but cozy pieces, and it was warm with her vibrant energy. We hauled my belongings up the narrow stairwell, Reese joking that he desperately needed a gym membership after this effort. Sienna immediately cleared space in her closet, shoving her clothes aside. Plenty of room, she declared, grinning. By 3 p.m., everything was unpacked. My clothes hung, my books stacked neatly on a borrowed shelf, my laptop plugged in on the kitchen counter. It was simple, sparse, but it was definitively mine, free from the soul-crushing weight of familial demands. I returned to the empty guest house for one final, necessary trip. I stood alone in the vacant space, the bare walls staring back at me. For a fleeting moment, I felt a deep pang of loss, not for the building itself, but for the future I had mistakenly hoped it represented. I forced the feeling away, moving to the small desk. I pulled out a clean sheet of paper. My hand trembled only slightly as I began to write the letter that would formally end my years of servitude. Mom and Dad, I began. I'm gone. I have been paying 1,500 credits a month for your mortgage, but you told me to get out. I am no longer responsible for this family, and specifically not for my brother's mounting debts. I'm done. I kept the message concise and deliberate, ensuring there was absolutely no room left for misinterpretation or negotiation. I folded the letter, placed it squarely on the desk, and locked the guest house door firmly behind me. It felt utterly final, the closing of a painful, protracted chapter. Driving away, an intense rush of relief flooded me, as if a tight knot in my chest had finally dissolved. For the first time in months, I could genuinely breathe. Sienna's apartment wasn't the dream home I'd pictured, but it represented a crucial fresh start, a place where my only accountability was to myself. I pictured my precious savings account, no longer hemorrhaging cash for someone else's continuous mistakes. The memory of Jackson's carelessness and my parents' aggressive, blind support still stung, but it was safely behind me now. I glanced into the rearview mirror, watching the guest house shrink until it was only a tiny speck, and let out a shaky, triumphant laugh. I had successfully done it. I was free. But as the initial high faded, a small, persistent flicker of worry took root. What would happen when they returned and found the empty room and the letter? Mom would likely dissolve into tears. Dad would fume with righteous anger. And Jackson? He would probably shrug, completely unbothered as always. I could already hear Dad's predictable voice accusing me of heartless abandonment, or Mom desperately pleading for my return. The letter was clear, but would they truly read the message? Would they even care beyond the financial inconvenience? I forcefully pushed the doubts aside, focusing solely on the road ahead. Sienna and Reese were waiting at the apartment, ready to order pizza and celebrate. Their laughter, I knew, would drown out the residual anxiety, at least for the duration of the evening. I pulled into the parking lot, the moving van's engine ticking quietly as it cooled. Sienna waved broadly from the balcony, her smile wide. Reese was already inside, setting up a temporary chair for me. This was my undeniable new normal. Imperfect perhaps, but entirely mine. The letter, however, lingered in my mind. Its words constituted a definitive line drawn in the sand. My family had explicitly made their choice, and now I had made mine. The future remained uncertain, but crucially, for the first time in my adult life, it felt like it belonged solely to me. 3 weeks later, Mom's desperate, panicked texts began to light up my phone. "Ilara, we're in terrible trouble," the first one read. "The bank is threatening to foreclose. Please call us." I stared at the screen, my coffee cooling on the counter in Sienna's cramped kitchen. They had found my letter. They had realized that I had finally stopped paying the massive 1,500 credits a month toward their mortgage. A formal bank notice had arrived, warning of imminent foreclosure if they failed to meet another payment, giving them a deadline of only 30 days before they would lose the house entirely. My stomach twisted, but not with guilt. Instead, I felt a strange combination of pity for their self-inflicted crisis and an unbreakable resolve. I had carried their burdens for far too long. Mom called that evening, her voice thin and trembling. "Ilara, we absolutely need you," she wept. "Just pay the mortgage for a little while longer. We swear we'll figure it out." I took a deep breath, standing by the window of my new small home, watching the city lights of Cascade flicker below. "You told me to get out," I said, my tone even but utterly firm. "I am not responsible for your choices, or for Jackson's choices," she pleaded, her words tumbling over one another. "Your brother is trying. He just needs time." I cut her off, my voice steady. "I'm done cleaning up his messes. You made your choice." Hung up the phone. My heart was pounding, but it felt significantly lighter. I had successfully drawn the line, and I would not allow myself to cross back over it. Word eventually trickled back to me through a neutral cousin. Jackson had not changed at all. He was still successfully dodging employment and aggressively racking up fresh credit card bills. Mom and Dad were scrambling desperately. Late notices were piling up, not just for the mortgage, but for utilities, car payments, and even Jackson's various gambling debts. The 10,000 credits Dad had demanded I cover was merely the surface of the problem. Jackson's persistent recklessness had pushed them deep into the red. The cousin confirmed the stark reality. The bank was serious about the foreclosure. Their house, the symbol of the stability I had paid for, was now operating on a ticking clock. I felt a slight pang imagining Mom's intense worry and Dad's explosive anger, but I quickly suppressed it. They had enabled Jackson, and they were now, finally, paying the steep price for that deliberate action. The cousin detailed the domestic scene. Mom and Dad were constantly at each other's throats, something that was virtually unheard of previously. The heated arguments were relentless. Dad blamed Mom for coddling Jackson. Mom fiercely accused Dad of pushing me away with his unforgiving ultimatum. They could not agree on a strategy for Jackson, Dad wanted to immediately cut him off and force him to fend for himself, while Mom stubbornly insisted on giving him yet another chance. Their vicious fights echoed throughout the house, forming an irreversible crack in the foundation of the family they had always claimed was unbreakable. Jackson, predictably, remained completely oblivious, still spending and still making empty promises that he would fix everything soon. Meanwhile, I was actively constructing something new. Sienna's apartment, despite its cramped space, its creaky floors, and its mismatched dishes, had become my true sanctuary. At work, I poured every ounce of my focus into the colossal ad campaign. The late nights, the endless revisions, and the nerve-wracking pitch meeting all paid off handsomely. The client was ecstatic. A week later, my boss called me into her office, a rare smile gracing her face. "You're our new senior strategist," she announced. The promotion came with a significant raise, more than enough for me to rapidly rebuild my savings, even while paying my new rent. I walked out of her office, my chest swelling with justified pride. For the very first time, I was moving forward, propelling myself toward my dreams, rather than desperately holding onto someone else's sinking reality. I hadn't spoken to Mom, Dad, or Jackson since the frantic phone call. I had blocked their numbers, not out of spite, but because it was a necessary act of self-defense. Every subsequent plea, every text, felt like a hook designed to drag me back down into their familiar chaos. Sienna often checked in, reminding me that I had done the only possible thing. "You're thriving," she affirmed one night over takeout. "Don't let them drag you back down." Reese echoed her sentiments at work, offering a high five when he heard the excellent news about the promotion. Their external support anchored me firmly, serving as a constant reminder that I did not require my original family's approval to be whole or successful. Looking back, the lesson was profoundly clear. Setting firm boundaries was not a selfish act. It was absolutely essential for survival. My family had manipulated me and guilted me into carrying their unbearable burdens, but I had successfully broken free. Their choices, their coddling of Jackson, their aggressive disregard for my sacrifices, had direct, devastating consequences. The threat of losing their house, the destructive fights tearing their marriage apart, those were now definitively their burdens, not mine. I felt immeasurably stronger, not because I had won a petty fight, but because I had chosen myself, my identity, and my future. My new life wasn't perfect, but it was wholly and unequivocally mine, built entirely on my own terms.